Makes a huge difference if you'll do me a favor by subscribing and liking the podcast wherever you listen. It goes a long way. Thanks, and I hope you enjoy. Dan Ariely is a professor of psychology and behavioral economics at Duke University, originally from Israel. He's also taught at MIT, where he studies our decision making and how we were predictably irrational and make the wrong decisions in many aspects of our lives, including our relationship with money. And his research is devoted to how he can help change some of those patterns, from financial decision making to health to better habits, even to a better personal life. Once he realized that understanding decision making can help himself live in a better way, he started to work on how to get everyone the same basic knowledge to improve our daily life. He's got a number of books: Irrationally Yours, Predictably Irrational, The Honest Truth About Dishonesty, a movie, The Irrational Game. A fascinating guy. He has burns over 70% of his body. We talk about that, how that happened when he was a teenager, how he survived and how he's dealt with it, how he thinks about pain, and he consults with hospitals and doctors and nurses. And fascinating guy, awesome conversation, and I hope you enjoy. Welcome, Dan. I appreciate you coming on and taking part of your summer, spending a part of a summer day with me. So thank you, and my audience. I wanted to go back, and if you could tell the story with my audience about what started out as a normal Friday afternoon for you in Israel when you were 18 years old at the time, right?
Yep.
What happened on that day that
So it
was
was a little bit
life-changing?
before I was 18, and basically there was an explosion. Very, very hot flames coming from um, a military flare. Military flare is this bomb that the military sent to the sky to light up a battlefield, and one of those got exploded next to me. Very hot, magnesium, and I get burned in 70% of my body, and no realization initially of what's really going on and how severe it is.
Yeah.
Then I get into hospital, and I basically spent almost 3 years in hospital.
Wow.
Slightly different periods, or very different periods. The initial period is intensive care, mostly trying to preserve life. After that, there's a period of trying to take a thin layer of skin from the areas that are healthy and transplant them on the parts that have no skin, waiting 2 weeks, letting the skin grow and doing it the same. So kind of my own skin growing factory. So I don't have burns on my stomach and upper thighs. So this became the area that they would take, but they had to take a thin layer, because if they take a thick layer, it takes a long time to heal and also takes a long time to catch. So they basically had this device that looked like a cheese slicer that you would, how you take cheese and you kind of take higher grade and you can get the thickness very precise, and they would slice the skin under anesthesia, of course, and then make some holes into it, rub the raw flesh where there was a burn so that it would bleed, and take all the dead parts out and put the skin on, and some of it would catch, some of it wouldn't catch. Then I had a period when I almost had no open wounds, but then the scar starts shrinking. So, one of for example, if I would sit with my hands folded like this for an hour, I couldn't stretch them after that. I would have to start stretching them very slowly because they would shrink so quickly. When you have scars, sometimes the scar is raised. The reason it's raised, it's collecting skin. It gets tighter. But if everything is a scar, then it's just this. And fighting against it was very tough. That was a period where I felt a tremendous betrayal of my body. Right? Imagine that, okay, so the burns are the burns and trying to heal, but then when I think, okay, this phase is over, now the skin is fighting me. It's like I was 18. I had lots of questions about my romantic and sexual identity. And then severe burns are an injury for life. I still have pain. I still have deformities. I still have things I can't do. I don't have much movement in my hands. Lots of things are difficult for me. And the world is kind of changing in interesting ways. A lot of technology has emerged that help people with my kind of disability. So we have more voice to text, for example. We have macros for typing. There's all kinds of things that can help. At the same time, the last few years have been, I think, characterized by increased bureaucracy. I work at the university now. Everything is a form, and the forms are online. And, I'm going to New York tomorrow. According to the Duke regulation, you have to pick hotels from a list. Everything.
Yes.
So it's kind of a mix of, there are some things that we get helped with technology, and some things are completely incompatible with my injury, like bureaucracy. Whenever you do a standardized procedure for everybody that is web-based and form-based, it's really hard for people like me. So and then the question that bothers me in hospital. I mean, I have lots of questions that bother me in hospital,
Yeah.
but one of them is the question of how to remove bandages from burn patients. So I think about romantic life, I think about pain, I think about pain medications, I think about lots of things. But I also worry a lot about the pain of treatment. And removing bandages from burn patients is very, very tough. Right? So everybody had the plaster removed. Okay, that's small, and sometimes we have hair. It's a different question. But imagine that 70% of your body is burned, and all of these bandages have to be taken off every day, and then ointment, and then wrapped again just to repeat this the next day. And one of the first questions I had was, what is the right way to do this? Imagine you wanted to minimize the pain of a patient. Would you remove the bandages slowly, maybe taking 2 hours instead of an hour, an hour and a half instead of an hour, but having the intensity of the pain being lower? Like what is it better? Like, when you rip a bandage, people have an intuition because there's hair, and hair actually comes out differently if it's fast and slow. But imagine there's no hair. It's just flash that blood is coming out, and it's meeting the bandage, and the bandage is kind of adhering to it, and now you're ripping off something very different. Do you do it slow? Do you do it fast? Do you try to, is your main goal minimizing duration, or is your main goal minimizing the high intensity of pain? And it turns out, and I wrote a lot about this, that the nurses thought that the right way is to minimize duration. Let's get it over with. And I thought I didn't like this approach. But later on, when I left the hospital, I went to university, and I did experiments on this question. Not with burns, I did it with different kinds of pain, including pain in the lab, electrical shocks, pressure, losing money, sounds. I did it with some pain with people who are going through chemotherapy. And I learned that it's not about duration. Imagine that you take the discussion between us, which hopefully will be pleasurable for people to listen to, and let's say it's an hour, and let's say we double the duration. Would we make it twice as good? No. But if we took a few moments and we made it better, that would have a much bigger impact. And the same thing is true about negative experiences. The intensity matters more than duration. So if the nurses wanted to minimize the experience of the pain, they should have worried more about the amplitude than about the duration. But that, for me, when I did this initial experiment, it was very eye-opening, because here were the nurses, kind, wonderful people, that clearly cared a lot about me and wanted my benefit. And nevertheless, their intuitions were guiding them in the wrong direction. And I started thinking about all kinds of ways in which we think we're doing something good, but we actually are not. And I think that's, for me, that's kind of the role of social science for me, which is we go ahead around kind of humanity. We have all kinds of things that we're inventing and doing and so on. And the question is, are we really living up to our potential? Or are there ways in which there are things that we just don't understand and we get wrong repeatedly? And social science for me is a way to figure out what are the things that we get wrong, and can we fix it?
Did nurses and or doctors listen to you about this process, or what was that experience like when you were
Not when I was a
communicating?
patient. Not when I was a patient. They
Interesting.
said the word patient is about being patient. We know better. Once I got my first set of results, I did go back to the hospital, and I did give a talk there. Since then, I give lots of talks in hospitals, and people are changing what they do. And by the way, anesthesia has gotten much better. I was a burn patient many years ago. One of the areas of medicine that has gotten much better is anesthesia and pain medication. Now there are much better drugs, and if I would get injured now, the way I got injured then, they would just put me to sleep for months. Now, when people are injured at this level, you say, why suffer? Let's just put them to sleep. Let's spend this first 6 months with them sleeping and so on. I very sadly just met a woman who, she and her son got very badly burned. And it was an electrical explosion from batteries. They were driving a small electrical vehicle, had the wrong kind of batteries. The batteries exploded. They both got very badly burned. And they put them both under to sleep. Sadly, the kid died 8 days later. The mother kept on being in a state of unconsciousness for 3 months. And then when they woke her up, first thing she asked was about her son, and they told her. And I met her when she was kind of on month 8 of the injury, still processing lots of complexity and grief.
What was that experience like for you?
To meet her or to?
Yeah, to meet her and
So
see her at that point.
I meet lots of people with injuries. I write about my injury. I write about it very openly. I write about lots of elements from it. So lots of people who get injured reach out to me, not because they care about my injury. People want to figure out their own injuries. When people get badly injured, it is very clear what we have lost. You can say, oh, I can't do X anymore. I can't do Y. That's very, very clear. But what you would be able to do is very, very tough. In psychology, there's this term, the illusion of the end of history. And the way we ask this question, and we say, think about now versus 10 years from now. How different do you think you'll be? And people say, you know what, I think I'll basically be the same. I've kind of arrived. I'm who I am, and 10 years from now, I'll be a little older, but I'll basically be myself. And then you say, 10 years ago, how different were you? Oh my goodness, I changed so much in the last 10 years. So we feel that we've gone through tremendous transition, but now we are who we are. And what people can very easily say is, I can't be who I am anymore. I've lost all of these things. But who we would be in 10 years is hard to see. And I don't have answers for people what they would be. I can just give them some directions and thoughts and so on. But so lots of people write me or call me or we talk about what to do next. Like, how do I find happiness? Okay, I used to do X. There was a guy who was a cartoonist, got badly burned. Some of his fingers had to be amputated. Clearly not going to be a cartoonist. Yeah. I said, that's everything I knew. Okay, I understand this. You think that the last 10 years were all leading to this. You'll be a different person. And I try to help them. So how are these? But you asked me. So anyway, I'm saying I have lots of those experiences, not just this woman. But if you ask me how they are, they're very tough. So you know how human intuition, how human empathy works?
A little bit, maybe.
So imagine that you see somebody walking by a table and their toe is hitting the corner and they have some pain. You feel the pain as well. Oof, you feel the pain as well. How do you feel the pain? What is this process? This process is called mirror neuron. You're not experiencing their pain directly. They're a different person. But you have these neurons that are imitating their neurons. And that's basically what empathy is. Empathy is you are activating the circuitry that you say how you would feel the pain if you were experiencing something like them. It's not exactly the same, but I'm not feeling your pain. My body is simulating the pain that I would feel if I was in that situation. Not fully, but that's how it works. So I have lots of experience with pain. And because of that, I think that I have lots of mirror neurons for pain. So there are some things I have zero empathy for. If somebody says, oh, I have a small cut here, it's a small cut, get over it. So there are some things that I don't have as much empathy, but for people who have real pain and real injuries and so on, I do have a lot of empathy, and it's tough and painful and complex, but I also feel I can help. And the feeling that I can do something to help over and the satisfaction and the sense of purpose and meaning and so on, it overwhelms the uncomfortableness of the sadness.
Were you the only one that was affected by that explosion, or were there?
There was another guy with me. He was on the other side of the explosion. He also had burns in his lungs because of the heat. We both also. But skin doesn't have a good blood flow, right? So when something goes wrong, it's very tough to fix. Lungs were better. So we both got, he helped me get out. He called me. So I was on this side, the fire was here, he was on the other side. And he called me, so I ran through the fire to escape. So he helped me get out. And he was in hospital for a bit, but not too long.
Have you stayed in touch with him over the decades?
No, when they, I don't know why, but first of all, I was in hospital for years. He wasn't, so but he didn't come and visit. Yeah, it's kind of interesting, when something bad happens, and who are the people that come and not. And I know that after people stop visiting for a while, it becomes harder to come all of a sudden. Okay, one close friend, relatively close friend, who didn't come in the beginning, and then he just didn't come. And then I heard that he had cancer. So I went to see him in hospital, and we had 3 years of rekindling our relationship. I was able to help because I was out of hospital, but it was the same hospital I was at. I had some shared experiences and so on, so I was able to help him out. We got to be friends again, and then he passed away. But it is interesting to kind of see who comes to visit, who doesn't, what's the social dynamic, who do you miss? Let me ask you, do you really want to know who your friends are? You don't have to answer. But it's I had a few times in my life that I learned who my real friends are, and every time it's a little bit of a shock, and then you say, did they really want to know? Maybe not.
Yeah. So when you were in there, was your parents or the people who raised you, like, were they coming on a regular basis, or did you have siblings, or?
Yeah, so there were people that were there for me in an unbelievable way. My mother, my father, and a few of my friends. They were just there. And in the beginning, at least, I wasn't really reactive. I was in bed, respirator, and not communicative. But they would be there reading stories, telling me things, and so on. Burn department, one of the big fears is infection. So only one person can go at a time. They have to get fully dressed, cover their hair, mask, gloves, down, right? Basically, every time you go out, you change, like, the first period. The fear is risk. We don't think about skin as an organ. It's a huge organ, very important, fighting off infection. And most people used to die from infection. With burns above 30%, most people used to die from organ failure. Like, it's such a shock to the body, and the body is trying to fight it and fails. But that's the immediate effect. The effect after that is infection. Used to be very important to try and Yeah, my parents were amazing. And actually, whenever I talk about my injury, like now, for example, I'm basically okay talk about my injury. The only time I cry, and I cry every time, when my parents were in the audience, because that also gives me an element of thinking about it from their perspective, and that's a very tough perspective.
So you get out after 3 or so years, and you go to Tel Aviv University, right? And you're majoring in math and physics initially?
I try, yes,
Yeah.
but my hands are terrible, so I can't hold the pen. I still can't really hold the pen. Now I can write a few words, but it's very painful and difficult. I can't do small motoric action, not in this hand and not in this hand. This hand, these two fingers don't work, and this hand, I don't have that much more. So like, if I have a thick pen, I can hold it, and if I need to write my name. But anyway, I couldn't even do that at that point. So I would have somebody that would write for me on the blackboard. So I don't know if you ever tried to solve math equations. Somebody on the board, and you say x equal y, no, maybe make it y hat. In high school, I could do math and physics in my head. I didn't have to do. University wasn't the same. So I did try to work with somebody who would write for me, but it wasn't really working. There's something very intimate about the relationship with a pen or pencil that kind of gets thinking, and when it's further and you dictate to somebody, it's just not the same. The thinking is very, very different and very interrupted. Like, try it once. Try to kind of solve an equation by dictating. It's not the same. So then I asked my mother to sign me up for a second year university to philosophy. And she went to sign me on the last day of registration, and I went to hospital. And there were no cell phones. And they told her that she can't just pick philosophy, that she also has to pick another major. So she said, what? She couldn't reach me, so she had to pick something last day of registration. So she asked the woman what she recommends, and the woman recommended psychology. So my mother registered me for philosophy and psychology. And when I got home that night, she told me that. I said, why psychology? The only thing I knew about psychology was clinical psychology.
Yeah.
And I had a therapist in hospital and so on, but I didn't like it so much. I had a very complex relationship with that, and I didn't really want that. But that's what I had to study. And then first year of psychology, I take this class on physiology of the brain.
Yeah.
And a few amazing things happened. And it's a unbelievably interesting class. What are all the structures in our brain? How are they influencing our behavior and so on? Very different than therapy. Right? So the second thing is that the teacher is a guy that lost both of his legs to a landmine.
Oh my goodness.
And he had a lot of phantom pain. Phantom pain is pain that you have in a limb that is no longer there. So he felt that his fingers, his toes, were growing inside into his feet, and the nails are going inside. Now, he had no feet, but he felt that his feet are doing that, and he had tremendous pain. He said he died a couple of years ago, 4 years ago, but he had tremendous pain from that. And we call it phantom pain because it's a pain in a limb that is not there, but there's physiology to it, right? It's the nerves who are doing this are imagining that there is something stimulating. So his name was Hanan Frank, and originally Dutch. And what was so interesting about him is that he took his fascination with pain and made it into his life's passion. So for me, this was a case where somebody was taking his own interest and saying, I'm going to study whatever interests me. He was also a smoker, so he was studying smoking. He had a lot of pain. He was studying pain, finding a lot of important things about both. And then Nan and I had lots of discussions about pain. He was older, but we were in the same hospital many years apart. Some of his physicians were my physicians, so we also had lots of discussions about pain. We both discovered that we don't take Novocaine when we go to the dentist. But just another pain. We're not that afraid. And then we did some experiments together on how people with our kind of injuries and what happens to our ability to tolerate pain later on. And the idea is that people with our kinds of injuries, pain is mostly a signal of something is getting better. There's treatment and pain, but it's about getting better. There's like pain and healing are kind of connected. So we say, I'm kind of used to that. It doesn't have the same frightening signal. So fascinating class, amazing guy that took his personal interest in doing this. And the other thing was he was truly an experimentalist. Like every time you would ask him something in class, you're saying epilepsy is driven by this, but could it be driven by something else? Could an epileptic seizure start in the spinal cord and not in the brain? And he wouldn't tell us the answer. He wouldn't say yes or no, or here's a paper, or here's this. He would say often, what experiment could you do that would test your question? So he got us to really think about experiments as a language to figure out knowledge. Then after we came up with an experiment, they say, okay, somebody did a better experiment, here's the answer. But I love that. I love the idea, unlike philosophy, where the teacher would say, until you can read Immanuel Kant in German, don't have your own idea.
The two extremes of teaching there.
And here was Hanan Frank saying, you're a first-year student, but if you can come up with a really interesting experiment, you might be able to learn something. And that semester, we practiced a lot, this muscle of saying, everything is a riddle. And experiments are a way to figure out riddles. And let's sort it out. Let's understand what it is. That got me to have the love of experimental. Kind of, if I look at my career trajectory, there are people who are driven by a question. I want to understand procrastination. I'm passionate about procrastination. Or I'm passionate about the I, or I'm passionate about something. For me, my passion has always been about improving the human condition. So from that perspective, I'm not kind of a good scientist. I don't have an area that I say, I really love the eye, or I really love, visual perception. Instead, I say, I love people. I think people we're mismanaging our effort, our attention, our time. We're not living up to our quality. And I'm happy to look around and look at all kinds of areas where I think we could do better. And I use experiments to figure out where we're failing, but only if I can think about the way to make things better. So I don't study things where I would say this is study for studying's sake. I almost never do that. I almost always want to have in my mind a way to say, okay, if I understood this and maybe 3 other steps, I could understand something about how to improve people's lives. So if you read some of my books, that's kind of the atmosphere, right? We figure out what are we doing, how are we fumbling around, and then where are we underperforming compared to what we could be doing. Let's understand this gap, but with an eye toward thinking about how we could do better.
The application.
The application is always very important. It doesn't have to be immediate, but I have to have a sense that it's on the horizon. Like, it doesn't have to be that, with this experiment, I'll know the answer. No, it could be a few steps down the line, but it needs to get me toward that direction.
What happens when we have some of the research, for example, to be happier, healthier, wealthier? Some of that exists, but there's a mismatch between what we know and what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in my field, one of the most generalized findings is that it's very hard to change people, and it's much easier to change our environment. So when we find a mismatch between what people want to do and what people do, we don't try to convince people to do things differently. We try to change their environment. So I'll give you an example. In the US, we spend between $700 and $800 million a year in total on programs for financial literacy.
Wow.
Lots of programs, short, long, schools, adults, all kinds of things in total. And there have been a lot of these programs have been evaluated. Do these training make a difference? And people have taken all of those things, all of those evaluations, and said, together, is financial literacy working? And the answer is no. The answer is that after these classes, people remember, right? So you teach people something and they remember. Not everything, but they remember. That's great. But do they act differently?
Yeah.
The answer is that the improvement in savings, budgeting, spending is about 0.1, 0.2%.
Oh my goodness.
So very small effect. So, and here's the problem. I can teach you everything about this, and then I send you to the mall with 6 credit cards. What's going to win?
The mall and the credit cards.
The mall. And you can think about this. You can think about it in all kinds of ways. I mean, I'll ask you a rhetorical question. Don't answer. When we ask people, do you sleep as much as you think you should? Almost everybody says no. Do you use social media more than you think is healthy for you? Yes. Do you eat not as healthy as you should? Everybody says. Do you exercise less than you think you should? I mean, the list of things that we know what's the right thing to do, but we don't know is very large. And it's not about not knowing. Like if we take texting while driving, everybody knows it's stupid. Nobody says, my New Year resolution is to text and drive more. It's clearly a stupid thing to do. But at the moment, phone is ringing, something is buzzing, it's tempting, and we make mistakes. And society is designed to tempt us. Right? If you think about, you go to the supermarket and you say, I don't want to buy things that I don't need, so I'll make a list. You have a list and you go to the supermarket. And that's great. But the supermarket also has a desire. And the supermarket controls the environment. They decide what's at eye level and what's waiting for you at the end of the aisle. And they decide where is the bakery and what kind of cinnamon buns they're going to put to get you to feel more hungry. And eventually we fail. So when we think about changing behavior, we don't think that the version of financial literacy is the right version. We think that the right version is designing better tools. Now, let me give you kind of a couple of metaphors for this. Let me build this up. So, my metaphor for the human mind is that the human mind is like a vintage Swiss Army knife. Okay, let me break it up. Vintage and Swiss Army knife. Let's start with the Swiss Army knife. The Swiss Army knife is not particularly good at anything. There's not a single task that you would say, I need to solve X, give me a Swiss Army knife. I need a can opener, give me the Swiss Army knife. I need tweezers, give me no. It's not particularly good at anything. What is its greatness? It's okay in lots of things, and it's very compact. And our brain is kind of like that. not particularly excellent in anything, but kind of good in lots of things. And we can carry it with us. It's compact. But our Swiss Army knife is a vintage Swiss Army knife. What I mean by that is that the tools in our Swiss Army knife were designed in a very different period for very different purposes. When we were roaming the savannah and hunting and gathering and all kinds of things. So we have tools that allow us to run when we see a lion. We don't have tools that let us deal with 30 years at retirement. We have tools that get us to stop and eat as much as we can every time we see sugar and fat. But we don't have tools to help us deal with complex medical decisions or with cryptocurrency or with interest rate and so on. So we never had really good tools. There was always a Swiss Army knife, but now it's a Swiss Army knife and it's irrelevant. So that's what we're dealing with. When we come to deal with the world, we're limited. We don't have the right tools. Like, they don't fit. Think about your opportunity cost of spending and saving rates and retirement savings. I don't have a tool for that. Yeah. And because so we make mistakes. So that's the first part. Now, how is the world working with our limited ability? So think about two extreme cases. Case one, cars. Every year, cars get better. How do cars get better? Slightly, maybe design, slightly energy, but mostly they get better by making it less likely that we would kill and injure ourselves and others. Mm-hmm. Cars become safer. Imagine the engineers of cars. They see us killing ourselves and others, and they say, let's give these people seatbelts. That will stop it. And we surprise them. Yeah, seatbelts are great, but they don't stop it. Let's give them anti-lock brakes. And when you think about cars, we have seatbelts and anti-lock brakes. We have rear view mirror. We have side mirrors. We have lights in the side mirrors. We have sensors that tell us the distance from the car in front of us. Basically, the car engineers are continuously trying to look at human weak points. They say, these people, they don't look to the side. They don't look behind their shoulder. It's too much work. Let's give them a mirror here to fix it. And they don't do this, let's give them a sensor. So the engineers for cars basically analyze what pitiful drivers we are, and they try to compensate that. So the car and us and technology and our pitiful ability to drive together, we're doing better. Right? We're doing much better today in terms of driving than we did 10 years ago. There's many more things that prevent us from killing ourselves and killing others. That's on one side of the scale. On the other side of the scale, we have information technology, social media. Social media also gets better every year. How do they get better every year? Every year, they also understand the human condition in a better and deeper way. But instead of helping us overcome it, they take advantage of that. So if the engineers in a car are trying to understand our weak points and trying to get the car to do what we don't do well, so that together we do better, the people who design social media and media in general are trying to understand our weak points and trying to double down on those things. So think about something like our love of gossip. Why do we love gossip? It's in our vintage Swiss Army knife. Imagine that we lived in a small community, you and I, 200 people, and you look bigger and stronger than I am, and I have an apple, and you're thinking about taking my apple from me. Okay, you're bigger and stronger, you can probably take it. What if I can gossip? And I can tell everybody, hey, this Chad guy, he takes apples from people. And not only that, everybody would listen to the gossip, and then everybody would be less likely to deal with you. Now, in that environment, you don't want to take my apple all of a sudden because I have a superpower. Gossip is like the police and the judicial system at once. Like, you can get punished by doing that. So we have a Swiss Army knife tool, gossip, that made sense in the ancient society. Now we live in online society. The people that we meet and we gossip about will never meet. We'll have no influence, no positive influence on them. We're not trying to change their behavior for the better. We're not trying to prevent them from doing something. So now social media is just honing down on our love of gossip. But nobody's benefiting from this. It's just making us worse and worse off. So I think that, we are who we are. We have this mind. Some things are better, some things are worse. We're studying some. And then the question is, what kind of world are we going to build? Are we building a world like cars that tries to understand where we fail and try to cover those weak spots, identify them and cover them up? Or are we going to be in the world like social media where you try to understand those weak points and trying to take advantage of us? Right? So cookies are on that side. Credit cards are on this side. Like, you can think about where we are on that. And for me, if you say, how do we move forward as a society? For me, the move forward is following the car example. right? How do we get a much better and more nuanced understanding of the tools that we have in our vintage Swiss Army knife, and how do we build the world to be compatible with those tools? So we don't have a tool for a compound interest, so we can take advantage of people. Or we can build a system that says, okay, you don't understand a compound interest, I'll help you in another way to figure out the long-term impact of saving or borrowing and so on. So that I think is our approach, is to deeply understand and then think about how do we build the world in a way that is compatible with what we have.
So if we're taking the financial literacy idea and that spending that 700 to 800 million you talked about, but getting this less than 1%, getting 0.1, 0.2 effectiveness, how do we change the environments or design the environments so that there's a better effectiveness rate?
So lots of ways, and it's nice that you picked money because money is relatively easy. For example, imagine we take a group of people and we say, what is your monthly budget that you want to spend on discretionary things, food, clothes, and so on? And let's say on average people say $2,000. And you give some people a credit card and you say, go ahead. And you give some people a prepaid debit card. You say, go ahead. What happens? What happens is that the people with a credit card go way over the 2,000. The people with a debit card also go over, but by less. The credit card, you just go up and up and up and up. The debit card, you're going down and down and down. You see the zero. Now, it's very hard to hit the zero. Most people, they need to load it again, but it gives you a sense money is running out and people become more cautious. Now, what happens if we say, you know what, instead of giving you $2,000 on a prepaid debit, let's give you $500 a week. What happens now? Much better. Why? Because if you start with $2,000, you feel rich and you overspend in the beginning. You move to a week, it's a little bit more manageable. You say, okay, where am I? And then you can go further. You can say, when should you give people the prepaid debit card? Should you give it to them on Friday or on Monday? Turns out, what do you think, Friday or Monday? That's right, Monday is better. Why? Because if you give people the prepaid debit card on Friday, the weekends happen and they spend a lot.
Uh-huh.
If you give it to them on Monday, they try to save some to have for the weekend.
Yeah.
And also, if they reached the end on the weekend, you can easily modulate your spending, right? On the weekday, you go to work, you're buying lunch. I mean, it's much more constrained. The weekend is much more flexible. So anyway, that's an example of saying credit versus debit, monthly versus weekly, Monday versus Friday. The moment you start thinking about the details, you could do much better. And with money, because money is digital, we can do lots of things with it, right? With food, it's tougher. If I wanted to change food, I would have to change supermarkets and restaurants and change your home. So the things that are more digital are giving us better tools for doing that. Anyway, so there's lots of other things to do, but it gives you an idea, right? When you say, okay, where are the mistakes? How to think about opportunity cost. Let's make it more salient. Another thing that we like doing in experiments is what we call anti-goals.
Okay.
So imagine we take something that you really like. So, you're in Denver, you say, I like going skiing in the winter.
Yeah.
And it cost me, I like to go 20 days over the winter, and it cost me $200 a day. Is that about right?
Yep, that's right.
Now imagine I give you that budget. So $4,000, right? It's $4,000, $200 a day, 20 days. And I say, you know what? I'll give you $5,000 for your ski time, but I'll include coffee in that budget as well. So now, if you go out and drink more coffee, you're going to just have less skiing. And now you have to think to yourself, what do I care more about? And the reality is that these trade-offs always exist. At some point, if you do all kinds of things, you'll have less money for skiing. Like maybe your kids will have less inheritance, but it would come off something. But if you make it more concrete, people start saying, let me take something that I think is indulgent and not that important to me. Let me take something that is important to me. Let me put them in the same category. And therefore, the connection will be more clear. Now, in a regular way, if you walk around the city and you buy coffee, where's this money coming from? You don't know. But if I connect it to another goal, now I can make it that you would think about, right? So if you had a credit card that has skiing and coffee connected, every time you see a coffee shop, you would say, is coffee more important to me than skiing? And you would say yes or no, whatever you decide is fine. But if you don't have that, every time you buy coffee, you don't think about what would you not be able to do. So this idea that we can think about opportunity cost of money, we just can't. We don't have a tool for that. So instead of thinking, every time you buy a cup of coffee, the money comes from somewhere. Like you will not be able to do something. But what? I can't tell you. That's the nature of money. So, okay, I don't have a tool to think about opportunity cost of money. Let's manufacture a way of thinking about it for you. Well, there are other things to do, right? We can give you a budget. We can do all kinds of other things to do that. But the key is to give people tools to deal with the complex world we're in. Now, the world changes, and these tools need to be adopted. And so the world of misinformation and social media is new. It wasn't long ago that we thought that Facebook is going to bring democracy to the world. And it could have, by the way. It could have gone in that direction. It just didn't. But, these things change a lot, and we have to think about how do we help people do better with these tools.
So when we make it more concrete, more salient, does that make us more rational?
It makes us make better decisions. It's not, the definition of rational is, there's lots of definitions, but if you think about the economic definition, it's a little limited in the sense that being rational means you don't have emotions. Being rational means you don't help other people because you're selfish. Being rational in the economic frameworks means you don't love. So I don't think we should go for a rational life necessarily. Right? There are lots of beautiful things about humanity. We do art, we write poetry, and we climb mountains, and we do lots of things that are not rational that are wonderful. So the standard is to make good decisions, but rational is slightly different.
So I know this doesn't connect, but I have to ask you this. It doesn't immediately connect, but maybe it will. How did Danny Kahneman persuade you, convince you to get a second doctorate in business when you already had a doctorate in psychology, right?
Yeah. So I didn't have one already. I was on the path.
Okay.
So I was a PhD student in psychology on the way to get a PhD. And Danny, at the time, I think felt very bad about our field. So as you can hear from the discussion, our field is very applied. And within a very applied field, I'm on the applied side. Eventually I want to help people. And I can help people by reducing pain, and I can help people get fighting less, and I can help people by spending less and saving more and taking care better of their health. I basically want to help in any way I can. I think where can I help more? And Danny, at the time, looked at our field, and he said, for psychologists, it doesn't look like enough psychology. It looks like it's too applied. And he was disappointed with that. I don't think that all psychology should be applied. I think lots of psychology is a wonderful field. There's lots of people should do whatever. But I think there is room for people who want to do applied work. But at the time, the applied work was being looked at as not good work. It was, we are kind of the ivory tower, we're far away, don't confuse us with people, we have theories and so on. So he was kind of disappointed with that direction, and he suggested I go to a business school. He said, look, in a business school, people eventually are committed to business objectives. So you have to get people to make better decisions, you have to move something about behavior. The currency is about changing something and not changing something in people's real life rather than staying remote. And so I was in a PhD program at UNC Chapel Hill in psychology, and he asked me to come and spend some time with him and his wife Anne. They both passed away by now. She was a wonderful psychologist working on attention, and we had some overlapping interests, me and her. But I decided to come to Duke and to stay at UNC at the same time. So I had a couple of years that I was finishing here and starting here. And for me, it was, so my PhD chapter was longer because I got 2 PhDs. But I always loved what I do, and what do I care if it's called a PhD or not? And doing a thesis is like another research project, and taking more classes is always good. So eventually it was very good for me. So I'm very happy I did this. And then I left for 10 years Duke. I went to MIT, and I learned a lot there. Actually, when I graduated, I had offers from all kinds of universities. And one of my advisors at the time, I said, what do you suggest? Like, what should I pick? And he said, pick the place where you would be the most different person 5 years from now. And it was a very, very interesting advice, because usually, like we said, the theory is I've arrived. I need a place that needs to let me do what I am. But what he was saying is, no. Your next appointment as a professor is just like another PhD. I mean, you get paid a little bit better. You don't have to have the same accountability, but you don't have an advisor in the same way, but you'll change a lot. And he said, where would you change the most in the direction you want to change? And that's why I picked MIT. It was a choice where I had to change the most and learn the most. I was the most uncomfortable, but it was fantastic. I loved my time there. And then after 10 years, I came back to Duke.
In what ways were you the most uncomfortable there?
Lots of standard economists, lots of people in the technology arena. There was no lab. I had to, it would have been very easy for me to go to a place that had a lab and people were running lab experiments, which is what I did. So I went to a place that had no lab, no psychologists. People were doing standard economics, technology. For example, one of the things that happened is that students from the media lab started coming to talk to me about advice for their experiments. And in a short while, the head of the media lab at the time, Nicholas Negroponte, calls me for a meeting. And he says, we introduced and we this, and then he says, how is your work going to change people's lives 10 years from now? I said, I don't know. Nobody ever asked me. People ask me, where do you want to publish? What kind of papers do you want to write? But nobody asked me about these things. I said, the truth is, I don't have an answer. Give me 2 weeks. So I went back. I thought about it. 2 weeks later, I came to him, and he liked my answer. And he said, okay, I'm giving you an appointment here as well. I was, for the next 8.5 years, I was with people who are technology people, not my people. But I learned so much. And by helping their students do experiments, I got involved in lots of projects and learned a lot. So it was a place where it was very hard to be who I was at the time, and I had to change because being a lab person was just almost impossible. I did some, but I had to change. So in that sense, it was very novel and new, and I learned a lot.
Did you consider staying at MIT in 2008 timeframe?
I did. I really loved the place. My ex-wife and I, at the time she was my wife, we just had our second child, and I thought that being close to her parents as grandparents is going to be good for everybody. So I thought it would be good for our kids. I thought it would be good for the grandparents. I think it was true, but the decision eventually was a quality of life decision for my kids and my wife. Anyway, yeah.
And how did Danny Kahneman get interested in your work? How did you come to know each other and his wife, and how did that relationship come about?
So we met quite a few years earlier, and so when I was an undergrad, because of my burns, this was in Israel, I had to stay out of the sun, and I had to be in a relatively cold environment. With burns, the skin doesn't perspire. So let's say I was in a place that was hot, I accumulate heat. And it's terrible. It takes a really long time to do that. So I looked for a place that had good AC to run into between, like when there was a break or between lectures, because like imagine you get hot and it takes a really long time to go down. I had to find a place with good AC. And Hanan Frank, the guy that lost both of his legs, he was the chair of the psych department. And there was a computer room with extra good AC. At the time, computers were kept in a cold environment. So he gave me the key, and I had a little office in the computer room, and I was next to computers, and I learned how to program. And I started programming experiments for different faculty. And one of the experiments I programmed was for somebody who was working with Danny on a joint project, and I programmed their experiment. So when Danny came to visit one time, we met and we went over the experiment and we talked about the details, and so then later on he offered me to come to join him at Berkeley. So our relationship started that way. I'm a big believer in luck. And what I mean by luck is I don't mean going to Las Vegas and being successful. What I mean by luck is luck is about trying lots of things. Right? If you just try one thing, very tough to be successful. If you try lots of things, much easier. but you want to try lots of things. You want to see what works and invest more energy into it. You want to see what doesn't work and stop, right? So luck is about creating lots of opportunities, but then not following through too much on things that are unlikely to work, and putting more energy in things that work. And I've done lots of these things in my life. So, I published quite a few books, but I also have lots of books that I started and never ended up with anything. I sold a couple of startups, but I also started lots of things that didn't work out. I carried out maybe 1,000 experiments, maybe more, probably more. Many of them didn't work out. So I think I try lots of things, and my life has been very rewarding because I try lots of things. Last week I pitched a reality show to Netflix. We'll see. We'll see if it will work. But anyway, I enjoy trying new things. I enjoy spend time on new things, go on limbs. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But I kind of think that we need to. By the way, my next book is going to be on why I think we don't take enough risks, and why I think people should take more risks.
And what types of risks should more people take?
Every risk.
Okay.
I think we don't take enough risk in our personal life, in our romantic life. I don't think we take enough risk with the restaurant we choose, the way we spend our time. I don't think we take enough risk in our businesses. I think in general we're so afraid that we don't take enough. We're so afraid about the downside that we don't take enough risk.
I can't wait to read that. Do you think?
Very good.
Do you think by experimenting as much as you have, you've increased your surface area of luck?
Yeah, I think so. And I've tried so many things. Some of them have worked out well, and I remember the things that have worked out. But my books that I decided, like, I tried to write a fiction book once. I went to Mexico City and I sat for 2 weeks and I wrote some things. I'm not a good fiction writer, but like, I don't look at it as a failure. It was something I tried. Didn't work out, perfectly fine, move on.
Do you think if you spent more time practicing that craft that you could, quote unquote, become one?
Maybe, but I think my natural talent is not there, and I didn't want to force it. And I spent enough time to figure out that I think this is not for me. Not maybe I would enjoy, but other people shouldn't be subjected to it. So I didn't need a market failure. It was fine to feel a subjective that it was not good enough. But I have lots of things like that. I tried and then I just said, no, not good. So I think I meet lots of random people. For example, I meet lots of random people. And sometimes after the meeting, they say, oh my goodness, what was this about? And sometimes you say, oh my goodness, this is unbelievable. Like yesterday, I met somebody from the music world. I didn't know what we wanted to talk about, but really fascinating. So anyway, so I do enjoy learning new things and trying new things. And sometimes you basically say, this particular one I regret, but as a strategy, like, okay, if I think about every meeting I have some regrettable meetings.
Right.
If I think about the collective of all the meetings I have, they create unbelievable interest and opportunity. And it's very easy to say, oh, this meeting was just a waste of time. But I took this meeting, the same thing, it led to this unbelievably amazing meeting where I learned a lot. So I try to look at kind of a portfolio of my strategy, and I think overall it's very good.
I love that. Yeah, rather than trying to aim for perfection, which is unattainable, it's the overall picture.
Yeah, I think the moment you are modest and you say, I don't know what would work. Yeah. I'm not, let me just try. And if you basically just try and you say, I didn't know, it could work well, couldn't, and let me see that. Then you're taking the negative effects less badly. You're not hitting yourself over the head, but you're also more open to opportunities.
That's beautiful. So, Dan, in closing, where can people find more about your work, your books, your website, your research, and any closing thoughts?
So my website is probably the best place, danariely.com, y.com. I have 3 projects that I'm very much involved with right now. One is I really detest bureaucracy. So I have a website called the Center for Advanced Bureaucracy where I post my complaining about bureaucracy. I'm also very confused with anti-Semitism. I'm Jewish, I'm Israeli, but I'm not a big fan of the Netanyahu government, but anti-Semitism baffles me. So I have a website where I invite anti-Semites to talk to me. I don't try to convince anybody. I don't try to argue. I just try to understand where opinions emerge, what do people understand about their own opinions, and so on. And then I have another project, which is kind of my biggest project right now, that has to do with the last chapter of people's lives. I'm very, like we said, there's lots of things to fix. I think one of the biggest one to fix is the last chapter of people's life. From the moment of terminal illness diagnosis until the end of life, it's on average slightly longer than 5 years. Very few people die quickly. Most of us will have a long time. What are the mistakes people make in this chapter? What are the things that we should do differently? So I have a website called The Life We Should Live, and there's a couple of surveys. People who had an experience that they want to talk to, I invite them to let me know. I try to talk to as many as I can, people who lost somebody or at the end of life. So that's basically the...
Wow. Thanks for sharing. Wow. That's really neat. That's had a conversation with a group of men last night about that, the last piece, the end of life, the last chapter.
Yeah. Very, very, very important, very under discussed.
Especially in the United States.
I think everywhere. I mean, the Western world is not doing well.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dan. This was an incredible conversation. I appreciate your time and energy and your insights. I just so love your work.
Thank you.
I love reading your work.
Thanks a lot. Very, very nice to meet you. Hopefully at some point in Denver face to face.
Yes, definitely. Or I'll be back when I come to North Carolina.
Please do. Lovely to talk to you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and if you liked it, please share with a friend on social media. That goes a long way to promoting this podcast so I can continue to interview and share these conversations with fascinating people. You can follow me on social media, Chad Stoloff, and visit my website, chadstoloff.wordpress.com, for more information. I'd love it if you would leave a review to support the podcast. Thanks so much. Until next time.